everybody, it's Danielle from SoGrateful.com and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to take you through the steps that I use to get a nice, well-fitting, brand new t-shirt using an old, well-fitting, but also well-worn t-shirt. Before I get started, I do want to mention that this tutorial assumes that you know some basic sewing terminology such as seam allowance and other things like that. Another thing I want to mention, when you are recreating a garment the way that I'm going to show in this tutorial, it is very important that the fabric that you are using for your new finished garment has similar, if not the same, stretch and recovery as the garment that you originally are using to make your pattern piece from. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a pretty weird fit. I hope you're ready. Let's get started. So this is the shirt that we are going to be recreating. This is my husband's work shirt. He wears it under his work uniforms. And as you can see, it's been pretty well worn. I went ahead and I pinned here one of the holes, and you can see I pinned here the other hole. I wanted to maintain the structure of the shirt. And when we opened up the side seam here, I didn't want this flopping and changing our shape. So this is the shirt we are going to recreate. The first thing that I like to think about is the construction of how it was put together, and we're gonna reverse the construction to take it apart to make our pattern pieces. So we're not gonna worry about the hem. We will add our hem into our final pattern once we've finished making it. Same thing with the sleeves. Hem, that doesn't matter right now either. So for right now, we're going to cut open the side seam. I like to do it from the inside out. So carefully without pinning yourself, and turn it so it's inside out. Okay, and again here you can see where there's a hole, and I just kind of secured it with a pin to keep the shape of the actual garment. So this is pretty simple with this kind of a construction. It's a basic t-shirt. So this is the seam here that we are going to cut up. Okay, so just go right here at the seam, and you're gonna work your way up. Now, it might be easier for you to cut this way, or it might be easier for you to cut this way. It doesn't really matter. You can see, you're just gonna follow this line the best that you can follow it. And you can see as we get up here, we have some holes, we have some lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this stitching here to keep this piece intact. So I'm going to just continue up this way. And this one I wasn't worried about pinning because we were going to cut that seam anyways. So I guess you could say my husband actually helped me out by creating this hole. Okay, we're going to cut right across. Now if you can see, here's our shirt, and we have just cut open our shirt. Okay, now we're gonna do the exact same thing on the other seam, from the bottom hem all the way up to the sleeve hem. And being careful not to separate this over here, I want to keep that shape. Now we're going to cut up the sleeve, the underarm, or sorry, the armpit, up the sleeve hem. Okay. Now our shirt, I'm sure if you've sewn a shirt before, you will recognize the way that this looks. We basically just opened it up and reversed our stitching, or reversed what we would normally be stitching. So you can see the pin here holding this piece together, and I have a pin here holding this piece together. Now the next part we're going to do is we're going to take off our sleeves. So we would have those pattern pieces. So we're going to do the exact same thing that we just did on the side seam, and we're going to do it here. Another thing to note is on like this kind of a shirt where the front and back are a little more difficult to tell the difference, I put a marking on the back here to cover the label for the shirt and also to mark the back, and then this is the front, just so you can keep it separated. And take your time when you're going over the shoulder seam, because most of these shirts are eased in to keep that curve. You're gonna wanna make sure that your cut is along that line. So don't be afraid to take your time. Okay, we have one sleeve. And I like to note the front and the back of it, just in case the sleeves are different from one to the other. So here's my front, and here would be my back. And if you see here, this is where it was. You can even mark here at your center seam to help you later on. When I first started sewing, I marked the back pieces with 2 and the front pieces with 1. I don't remember why I started doing that, but I've been doing it ever since. So I always know 2 means back, 1 means front. Okay, so here we have 1 piece. And now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna cut the other sleeve. Same thing. Again, take your time. And if it's easier for you, since we just cut that, to mark it and clip it as you go, you can totally stop and do that. All right. So again, here's the back. Clip it twice. And the front. And now I have my other sleeve. So there's our sleeves. So all we have is a front and a back and a neckband. So you have the option at this point of just leaving it and making your pattern pieces from this. I'm gonna go ahead and deconstruct the whole thing though, just so you can see the whole process. But if you were comfortable enough, you could just leave it at this point and use these pieces. Also for the neckband, you can see this is really just stretched out. I'm not even gonna worry about trying to recreate this neckband. We're gonna create the pattern and then we'll calculate our own neckband piece. So let's go and switch it. And this is the back and this is the front. So, since we're not even worried about this neckband, I'm actually going to just snip right through it to separate out my front and my back. Okay, here's our back piece and our front piece. Again, you could leave this neckband on for making our pattern piece, or you can cut it off. I'm going to go ahead and just cut it off. Use my rotary. I'm just going to run it right across, or right along the seam. You could also do this with your fronts if that's easier for you. I like to do scissors for those, and then this makes it nice and smooth for me for tracing out later. Okay, so here is our back, or sorry, our front. Here's the back. Same thing. Okay, and there's your back piece. Now, we do want to pay attention to our neckband height. Since we are recreating this the best we can, this is important. So if you notice here, this is 1 inch. So the finished neckband is 1 inch in height. So we'll want to remember that when we go to make our neckband pieces for the shirt. Now that we have our shirt deconstructed, we can go ahead and start making our paper pattern pieces to recreate this off of. You can just use this and cut your stuff out, but I like to try and make it as uniform as possible, and therefore I transfer it onto paper, and then I'll have a copy that I can keep around, hopefully for a longer time. If you see here, we're going to start with our sleeves first. Here's the point that we marked that was attached at the center seam, front and back, front and back. And upon looking at these closer, it actually looks like we could just do one of these that we will cut on the fold. So I'm gonna go ahead and look at them. This one's a little more stretched out than this one is, so we're gonna use this one to make our pattern piece. So I'm just gonna place it on here, line it up to make sure that it's in half. Okay, and you can see this is right here at the center. Where our fold is. I am going to take it out because I want a flat line to trace. And then normally when I trace this, I use a pencil so I can erase it. I'm gonna do a pen just so that way you guys can see it a little better. So excuse my wobbling because I do have a shaky hand. So this will be our pattern piece. I'm gonna go ahead and put these back on here just in case I need them later. Now I'm gonna remove this. Oops, I forgot to put my center back. And then this is gonna be our fold right here. And then this is going to actually be where our seam is for attaching to the shoulder seam. So I like to mark that. And then now this is where the hem would be. And so this side is gonna need a hem added. This side is gonna need a seam allowance added. And this side will need a seam allowance added. So you can decide whatever you want it to be. I usually use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but because I'm recreating this from a different, from a finished garment, I'm gonna give myself 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to a 1/2 inch. That way, if the fit is just a little bit off once I do it, I can go ahead and take out more if I need to. So to do that, just determine your seam allowance that you want to add to each side. So we're gonna go ahead, just to make it easier for marking purposes, we're gonna go ahead and do a 1/2. So I match up my 1/2 mark here. This might be easier to see. Let's go this way. And I just line it up around this mark, and I mark it several points. If you have a curve ruler, this works great too. So I'm just gonna mark it, and then this would be drawn in. So this is gonna be our 1/2 inch seam allowance that we just added, okay? And then we will want to do the same thing for this top part. Now, because we did extend out here, you're gonna want to carry the same curve and extend it all the way to this line out here. So keep that in mind. A lot of times I will actually take it further than it, and then I'll just cut it off when I cut out my paper. And then down here at the bottom, this shirt looks like it has a 1 inch hem. My husband doesn't usually like a 1 inch hem, so I'm actually gonna go with 3/4 hem for him. Then I like to note on here so I don't forget what I just did. 3/4 inch hem, and this was a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, and then we're just gonna kind of finish. You can see how wobbly this is. So just try and smooth it out a little bit to make it look a little nicer. And we are going to cut 2 So now we have our sleeve pattern piece done, and we are going to move on to one of our shirt pieces. So this is the front. Again, if you remember, we noted it with one clip. Here's your shoulder seams, your arms, and down here towards the hem. You have two ways of doing this. You could just do one whole piece and just trace it, or you can fold it in half and do it on the fold. I'd like to conserve paper, and it's a little easier for me the way I sew to do the half. So we are going to fold the shirt in half. Now remember, this is where the hole, one of the holes was. So I'm gonna use this side over here, this complete side, as more of my base point. Okay, we're gonna go ahead with this. And I'm gonna go ahead and move my clip for right now to make sure I get a good smooth line here. And again, this is really stretched, so when I actually go to cut this out, I'm not gonna bow it out the front here because that's not how this was intended. That's just from where okay. So we're gonna go ahead and we are gonna remove our fabric. And I don't wanna forget what this is, so we're gonna label this right away as the front. This is gonna be the fold. Okay, and then this is your neck, your shoulder seams, your arm side, armpit, down the side. This we need to add seam allowance. Just like we did for our sleeve piece, we need to add seam allowance to here, seam allowance to the neck. We do not have to add anything here because it's strictly going to be folded on the pattern piece. We do need to add some down the side and a hem allowance at the bottom. So I'm going to do the exact same thing seam allowance wise on the shirt. We're going to just mark off a 1/2 inch here along this curve. This was the 1/2 inch seam allowance, 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, down here on the hem, we are not going to do a 1/2 inch. We're going to do the same 3/4 inch hem down here that we did on the sleeve. Okay, so as you can see, we have a pretty good outline from where we've added. So we're just going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit. And you can tell how wobbly I am and the fabric is wobbly. So what I like to do is, this is on a fold, so it should be pretty darn straight, which you can see is not. So what I will usually do is I will try and clean it up just a little bit here. And if you remember up here, the fabric was so stretched out it came out, so I just kind of made a little mark for where it should be approximately. Which, lining it up here, kind of gives us a pretty smooth line. So you can see the now straight line that'll go on a fold. And we are going cut one on fold. Okay, this is your front, and now we're gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing with our back piece. Okay, now it's time to do our back piece. So we're gonna take this same thing and we're gonna fold it in half. And again, this is the part that has the hole, so we are going to use this side as our complete piece. There's our back piece. And we're going to do the same thing and add our fold here. And then add our 1/2 inch seam allowance here, half here down the side, and then the 3/4 at the bottom. And then down here at the bottom, we're going to do our 3/4 inch hem. And then you're going to make your same notes. So this is back. You're going to cut one on the fold. And then this is 1/2 inch. And then your 3/4 inch hem. And I'm just gonna double check it and make sure this was a lot smoother, this fold here, than the front piece was. Now we have all of our pattern pieces transferred onto paper. We're gonna go ahead and cut them out and then cut out our fabric. Okay, so now we are back and we have cut out our pattern pieces and cut out our fabric pieces. We have 2 pockets. We have our back piece and our front piece. One thing I wanted to note was before you cut out your fabric, you should check to make sure that your side seam for your front and your side seam for your front and your back match, so that way when you're sewing them together that they're the right length. So I went ahead and I did that, mine matched, so I went ahead and I cut this out. You'll notice I have clips all over it. I like to clip my fabric to my pattern pieces as I'm cutting them out, because when I move them around and I want to make sure that I don't lose my pieces. Here's our back piece. Again, I noted it with 2. I'm gonna go and take it off, and I'm actually gonna transfer this to right in the middle. I like to keep my center marked. It makes it easier for me later on when I am doing my neckbands. So now we're gonna talk about assembly really quick here. So we're gonna open up our back piece. And remember, I used 2 for the back, 1 for the front. So there's our back piece. And we are going to do the exact same for our front piece. And we are going to place them right sides together at the shoulder seams. We are going to go ahead and go sew this at our machine and come back and continue. Okay, we're back. I went ahead and I serged my shoulder seams. Now, remember we talked about that I was gonna do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. When you do a serger, it will actually cut off the excess fabric, leaving you with a 1/4 inch on here. Since I wanted to have some wiggle room in case it wasn't appropriate fitting, I went ahead and I only serged it at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. That way if I need to come back a little bit later and take more, I can. But I did account for a 1/2 inch. Okay, so now our shoulder seams are done, and we're gonna go ahead and put our sleeves on. Since the sleeves were the same, front and back, I'm gonna do it right sides together. And if you remember, I marked at the seam where we're gonna put that. I like to do my center, and then I do my 2 end pieces because I know those have to match. And then I just kind of ease my fabric in the middle without stretching it to do the rest. I found that if I turn the fabric and fold it as though it was going in a curve, it's easier to ease it in than versus trying to do it straight where the fabric slips and it doesn't match. Here's one. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it. And let's put the other one on. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and serge this, and we'll be back for the next part. Okay, we're back, and we have just serged on our sleeve onto our shirt. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our shirt and we're gonna turn it right sides together so we can assemble our side seams. And when I'm doing this, I always like to start with my armpit seam here. And then working your way down from that to your seam, over to your hem. And then repeat on the other side. Okay, and now we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna sew armpit down the side seam, both sides. Okay, we're back. Now our shoulder seams are done, sleeves are on, side seams are sewn. Now we're gonna talk about the neckband. Remember how we set it aside before? We're gonna create our own neckband. So how I like to do this is you measure your neckband with a soft tape measure. So you measure around it, which I did, and I got 17 inches. So then you times that by 85%. So our measurement for our neckband is 14.45, which I like to just round. It makes it easier for cutting. So we're gonna do 14.5 around, and we had a 1-inch neckband on the shirt that we're trying to replicate. So you're gonna double that because it is folded in half, so you have 2 inches. And then you need to add our seam allowance, which we determined was gonna be 1/2 inch in this case, so you need to add an additional 1 inch. So our neckband we're gonna cut is gonna be 3 inches wide by 14.5 long. And we're gonna go ahead and cut that out, and we will be back to talk about putting the neckband on. Okay, we're back. We have cut out our neckband. It is gonna be 3 inches wide by 14.5 inches long. Wanted to note to make sure that your greatest direction of stretch is going around. This is gonna be around the neck, so you want your greatest direction of stretch to go this way to encompass opening and closing for the head. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn these right sides together. And we are gonna go sew this together to make a seam, and we'll be back in a minute. Okay, we're back. We have sewn our neckband together so it isn't around. So what we are going to do now is we are going to quarter it. So you're gonna take it and turn it so that it's wrong sides together, enclosing your seam that you just made. And we are gonna evenly place this in 4 places. So here's our back. And just work your way around. And I like to just balance it out. So there's your other half. And then I take those 2 half points and put them together to give us our quarter points. And once you have your neckband quartered, you set that aside. And we are going to turn our shirt right side out. And we are going to quarter our neckline on our shirt. So if you notice, we have already marked the center front and the center back of the shirt. So I just pull this center front up to the back, slide it over and pinch it. There's your other one. And you will notice that the shoulder seam is not the quarter of the neckband. It's a little bit in front of it in this shirt. So now we have our 4 pieces marked on here. So here's our back. So I want to make sure it's there. This is the front. So you're going to put them together, right sides together with the raw edges aligned. And you're just going to work your way around and clip them together. And once you have your 2 pieces clipped together, we're going to take it to our sewing machine or serger and we're going to go ahead and sew that. Okay, we are back and the neckband is now on. At this point, if you are sure of your fit, you can do your hemming on your sleeves and your hem. I'm going to have my husband try it on real quick and make sure it fits properly before I go ahead and do my hemming. So I'm going to do that and then we'll be back to finish up the shirt. Okay, we are back and my husband has tried this on and got his seal of approval on it. So I was okay with the extra little portion that I included in the seam allowance. It ended up working out just fine. So now at this point, we are just gonna go ahead and hem it. So I like to hem it inside out. Makes it easier for me. And remember we did on this one, I did 3/4 of an inch of a hem. So I'm just gonna fold that up and work my way around. Now when I get to my side seam here, I have a cover stitch machine and it really does not like going over the hem. So what I do is I come past it, get my measurement on this side for what I want. Because my hem was, when it serged the side, my side seam was off just a smidge. So I like to hem on this side, hem on this side, and then to make it straight. And then what I do is I snip just into my seam, not all the way through the needle thread, and fold one way, fold the seam the other way. And then I smooth it out. Okay, and now it's even. And we're gonna do this through the bottom hem. We're gonna do the sleeves as well. And then I'm gonna go ahead and cover stitch them. And I will come back and I will show you the finished product. Okay, we are back. The shirt has been hemmed, both sleeve and the bottom hem. And now for the moment of truth. Finished product. My husband had several of these shirts. This one wasn't quite as worn as the other one, so he asked that I didn't cut this one up, which I'm hoping I can convince him otherwise, since you can see this one's not much in better shape. Oh, there we go. So if you'll remember, I added a little extra in here for seam allowance to account for some wiggle room, which when he tried it on, he said was good to leave in. He actually liked the fit. So if I had taken that additional out, this would have been pretty spot on with the original and with this. So that's it. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Feel free to click subscribe if you'd like to be notified of any future videos that I publish. Bye!